And breaking right now, Mark Steyn, one of the world's biggest truth tellers, is facing financial ruin for fighting the revolting government censors the Ofcommunists after he was thrown under the bus by GB News for reporting the truth about many things, including grooming gangs, but specifically COVID vaccines. So Steyn has been charged £50,000 in a court-ordered payment. He has been told he has to make this payment within 4 days after taking the UK's evil state censor to court. Now, this actually gets worse because the Ofcommunists are demanding £144,959.28 in total. That is utterly sick, given that this is an organisation trying to take away our free speech that shouldn't even exist. Now, Mark is trying to see the positive side of this situation. He's released a newsletter over the past week saying that it could be worse for him. He could be banged up and Belmarsh like poor old Tommy Robinson. However, this is a very serious and sad situation. Mark, you probably know if you've followed his career through Fox News and GB News and his independent venture, has suffered from 2 serious heart attacks. So his ability to work in the same way has been somewhat limited. So a fan website, Friends of Mark Steyn, is now attempting to raise these funds for him over the next 4 days. And this website reads, Steyn never held anti-vaccine views and even received multiple doses of the COVID-19 shots. Subsequently, Steyn miraculously survived 2 heart attacks in 2022. And although he recovered and returned to GB News, his reporting on government health data led to him being fired from GB News after pressure from Ofcom. Ofcom accused Steyn of breaching their rules as it gave a materially misleading interpretation of the figures which risked harm to viewers and won their battle in the UK court. Ofcom did not accuse Steyn of presenting invalid data. Again, the data he shared during a monologue was from the official UK Health Agency's website, but they said his interpretation of the data was harmful and might have led to vaccine hesitancy. Now, this organisation, the Friends of Mark Steyn, says organisations like Ofcom are the enemy of free speech and a free society, but organisations like these are precisely why so many people are turning to X, to podcasts, to alternative news outlets to get unfiltered information that they can decide and decipher for themselves. Censorship is always the enemy of the people. Now, I feel very strongly about this one personally. I have fought the Ofcommunists myself over the past year, and they may have succeeded in getting GB News to capitulate, which eventually resulted in me leaving that broadcaster, but I couldn't be happier. Because the brilliant thing about Outspoken for the moment is that I am not under the regulation of the Ofcommunists. Hallelujah. And they had to drop their last investigation into me because what they were doing was sick and I called them out. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of that today. Suffice to say, though, I know how this organisation, the Ofcommunists, operates. They are the enemy of free speech. I also know a lot about Mark Steyn. I worked with him incredibly closely at GB News. His show preceded mine. We'd chat every day on air. And I was also part of one of the bravest pieces of broadcasting in modern British history, Victims of the Vax, where I appeared on screen with Mark Steyn. And for the first time, we gave a voice to the people who had been maimed or had relatives killed as a result of the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, just remember how difficult that was to do back in 2020, 2021, 2022. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. might now be the incoming health secretary in the US, but at that time, talking about these issues anywhere on mainstream television was virtually impossible. But Mark and I knew it was important and we knew we had to do it. So, Tom Sullivan, you worked previously at GB News as well. You were there during those brave days when we were prepared to fight the establishment, where we were prepared to talk about these issues. It feels appalling to me that the Ofcommunists, who, remember, are funded by the state, are effectively trying to bankrupt Mark Steyn, still recovering from 2 heart attacks, by demanding over £144,000 from him.
It's reminiscent of the shakedown that's going on at the moment with Alex Jones and InfoWars. He might not be everyone's cup of tea. Everything's big in America, including the cost of the takedown. He's been hit with over $1 billion in a defamation, and he's being forced to sell everything and shut down the media company, which he's built up over 20 years. I just think it's such a cheek, Dan, that Ofcom used this language. Are they going to, I just want to get the wording right, are they going to say anything about the months and months of materially misleading interpretation of the dangers of COVID, of the risk of side effect from these products, which, to use their words again, risk harm to viewers? Well, in this case, many of them were not just harmed, many of them had died. And as you pointed out, Mark himself took these products and subsequently had 2 heart attacks. So to add insult to literal injury, Mark is actually a victim of these very products that he has been taken down for exposing. And I do wish that Mark is able to look on the bright side and, like yourself and some other people, actually be able to spread their message more freely and to a wider audience when released, as you say, for now, because Ofcom and the government, especially this one, they do want to give Ofcom the remit to regulate the internet, and that's game over, basically.
It is, unfortunately, because Patrick O'Flynn, there is terror throughout the mainstream media to talk about these issues. I mean, for example, I have spoken significantly about the cover-up over the Southport massacre, which is another incredibly important issue at the moment. Now, there have been a couple of brave people who've raised their head above the parapet in the mainstream media, one of them being Alison Pearson, who wrote brilliantly on this for the Daily Telegraph. But there has been absolutely no coverage of it on GB News, and they are terrified. Now, maybe you understand why they're terrified, because this is the chilling impact of Ofcom regulation. Remember, GB News itself has been fined over £100,000, isn't it? They are currently fighting that themselves in court.
I think that's right. And I can't take Ofcom seriously or can't respect them while they have done nothing to try and show objectivity and not groupthink. For instance, the most famous example is they thought it was fine for the Labour Home Secretary to be interviewed by her own husband on public policy, and haven't opened an investigation into that. There have also been several cases on several broadcasters where male-bodied people who identify as women and have committed serious crimes have been described all the way through the reports as she and her. And again, I see no Ofcom intervention in that whatsoever. So my suspicion about Ofcom is they're a bunch of North London liberal lefties who always weigh in on against one side and turn a blind eye against the other. Now, if you want minimal regulation, or if you want reasonably muscular regulation of broadcasting, if you don't have that underpinning of a respect for objectivity and unbiased assessment, then you won't get off the ground, and it will cause enormous angst and resentment across our society, and it will be perceived as yet another way in which one side of the political debate is silenced, and that can't be healthy for democracy.
No, it's not. And the thing is, I'm so sad about the way that GB News has been muzzled. I mean, I wanted to show this from June 2022, and I was so impacted by Alex Mitchell. He is the Scottish man, the father, who lost his leg as a result of the AstraZeneca COVID jab, and he was one of the first to receive the government payout of £120,000. But honestly, I cannot tell you how opposed so many people were to me literally interviewing him, Tom Sullivan.
I mean, Alex, I've got him on various places that I've worked. He's a great guy, and yeah, it's disgusting. And it's actually, people like Alex who are not keeping quiet. I mean, someone who's gone through that might just say, I'm just going to think about myself and look after ourselves. But, he keeps going. And as we say, thankfully, we are able to do what we're doing right now through the internet. But I don't know how long that will last.
Well, no, of course, because the Ofcommunists, and this is the terrifying thing, Patrick O'Flynn, they want to regulate the internet. And the online safety bill has been a part of that. Now, I think they're going to face a real challenge, though, Patrick, because if you look at Mark Steyn, for example, he was actually broadcasting those shows on GB News from the US. So if the Ofcommunists say, okay, we are now going to regulate the internet, what does that mean? Does that mean that they start censoring Megyn Kelly, who broadcasts to the UK via YouTube and Rumble? Does that mean that they start to censor Tucker Carlson, who broadcasts to the UK via Rumble and X? Does that mean they start to censor Steve Bannon, who broadcasts to the UK via Rumble and Rumble? And its brilliant chief executive has been very clear that if there's any form of censorship, they walk away from that territory. So you cannot access Rumble in France, for example. So this is all a very slippery slope if they do try and regulate the internet, which is why I think they've instead tried to put their foot on the throttle when it comes to GB News, because GB News is an obvious, easy target.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say GB News has clearly dialed it down on some issues, but on other issues, it's still doing excellent work. It's digging away on lots of aspects of the migration debate and has helped move the dial on that. So I don't see them kind of losing their bravery on every subject. There are certainly, they're obviously keen not to keep getting Ofcom judgments against them. And they have to be very careful that they don't lose that USP which drew viewers to them in the first place, which was to offer, a platform for opinions which had been edited out of the mainstream so-called television companies. So I hope they don't go too corporate. I hope they don't smooth off too many of those edges, because they have played a role, and you two have both played a role during your time with them in something really exceptional, which is blowing the lid off the cartel. And now we have all sorts of new ways of broadcasting, and your platform, Dan, is become one of the biggest independent platforms, and this job of trying to suppress and uphold uniformity of thought is becoming far, far harder for the regulators. And now we have this amazing election result in the United States, by far the biggest media market in the world. I think the likes of Ofcom could find themselves quite easily overwhelmed, and the whole idea of authorizing opinions and cancelling other opinions is just going to start looking ridiculous.
Totally. I mean, the Ofcommunists should be abolished. In a free society, there should be no state regulator. I have always believed that. I've always taken a different approach, Tom, to the GB News approach. And I think Nigel Farage was always with me, to be honest, because I never thought that we should be saying, oh, no, it's great, we welcome this regulation from the Ofcommunists. No, absolutely not. Call it out. Call out their regulation, which actually, over COVID, for example, proved to be so wrong, because it was the Ofcommunists who were making it impossible for people like me to say wearing a mask is useless, it's hopeless, it's not going to do anything, it's not going to help anything. So I do think there has been a game change. And they are going to look increasingly ridiculous, because if you look at what happened in the US election, it was the independent media that was driving the conversation. I believe the mainstream media died the night that Donald Trump was re-elected to the White House. So I think they are going to look increasingly out of touch if the Ofcommunists try and usher in a censorship regime here in the UK. But it does appear that is what they are doing. But first, I love the holidays. It's my favourite time of year in many ways. Got my Christmas tree up already. But I find it can be very demanding going to all the events, dinners, looking for gifts, and planning the day itself. Every year I tend to burn out quicker than the last, and it may have something to do with the fact I'm getting a little bit older. But this year, I don't plan to burn out at all. Getting older is inevitable, but feeling older isn't. As we get older, our body's ability to create energy declines, but recent scientific discoveries have found we can actually increase our energy levels in our cells by taking something called NMN. Now, NMN has been shown to increase energy and endurance, activate our body's ability to burn fat, enhance mental function and health, improve blood pressure, regulate blood sugar levels, and support many other health markers. Finding high-quality, pure NMN is hard, though, so that's why I use Verso. They conduct third-party testing for each batch produced to guarantee you get what you paid for. It contains the highest quality NMN and other research-backed ingredients that have been shown to increase energy levels and slow down aging. After taking Cellbean for some time, I feel like a younger version of me. I've noticed more energy, enhanced endurance, improved cognition, fat loss, better sleep, and if I do get a cold, I recover faster. So click on the link in the description on YouTube and Rumble, or head on over to www.ver.so and use the coupon code Outspoken when you check out to save 15% off your first order. I'm just going to repeat the website address, www.buy.ver.so/outspoken, and use the coupon code Outspoken.
I mean, I think I'm not against a media regulator in principle, but I do think it should have very basic rules when it comes to not showing, for example, explicit material for a watershed and things like that. And I'm on my fourth TV channel fourth Ofcom regulated TV channel at the moment. So I've done, more kind of training than most. And the rules are actually quite, to be honest, the rules themselves are quite open to interpretation. They're quite reasonable and they're quite balanced. Some of them are a bit, weird. For example, if you want to discuss one of these stupid woke stories like the, ban dog walking to not be racist and stuff, the way it often plays out is that, you have to get someone who will support that opinion, who actually doesn't deserve, airtime at all. And you kind of end up giving equal weight to lunatics. So, it has its issues. The problem is, Dan, is with how it's interpreted, because the people who run Ofcom decide what breaks the rules and what doesn't. And they decide this in a completely ideological way. And I do think the US election, broke the internet. The internet broke the mainstream media. The American networks, at least the Democrat supporter ones, they are, even now still, they are kind of North Korean in their delusions, and they don't even pretend to do it. So I am a fan of, the British way of broadcasting, which is kind of the flip. So our newspapers are a bit crazy and our broadcasting tries or pretends to be at least a bit more sensible. There, that's the other way around. But the problem is, it's like with the BBC. People say, let's abolish the BBC. I actually think, no, let's take over the BBC and fill it with, common sense patriots and actually have it promote the values and the great history and culture of this country. And I think, like what Trump is doing now, and they're saying, we're not going to afuera like Javier Milei. We're actually going to put our own people into these institutions. I think that's a route that Reform, Nigel Farage, and other people who have the right idea might do well to kind of look into and take up the mantle.
Well, I think we need a First Amendment. I genuinely do. Look at what's happened to Alison Pearson this week. I think if Nigel Farage was to make a key part of his reform agenda, Patrick O'Flynn, a First Amendment. We absolutely guarantee free speech. I mean, obviously it would have a different name because we don't have the same type of constitution, but the First Amendment in the US protects free speech. That would solve all of these issues, Patrick. It would mean Mark Steyn would be allowed to broadcast whatever he wanted. It would mean Tommy Robinson wasn't in prison. It would mean that Alison Pearson wasn't having 2 police officers turn up at her Essex home for a post on X.
Yeah, I mean, I do think around active trials, there does need to be rules, about not prejudicing a trial as it goes through, with the risk of crashing the trial and allowing guilty people to get away with it. So I'm slightly old-fashioned on that one. I do, on the other hand, think in the general terms, a bias in favour of freedom of expression. And if someone can be shown to have got it wrong, that shouldn't be the end of the world. Perhaps they should put their hands up about it if it's definitely something they got wrong. But kind of, so what? And, we read, for instance, of the Mohammed Al-Fayed using his power, and the British libel laws to mask decades of sexual abuse and assaults on female employees. So the danger we face in a free society, I would argue, is far more, not allowing daylight in to dark doings than it is on too much daylight, and the truth occasionally not coming out straight and getting mangled. You have to be in favor of openness. And ultimately, if someone gets it badly wrong, then as long as you have complete freedom of speech for everyone, that they will be exposed for doing that. Yet the British knee-jerk seems to be, oh no, we've got to ban those opinions because we don't want the lower orders, getting angry.
Yeah, I mean, they were terrified
stuff.
when it came to Mark Steyn, weren't they? Because he was dropping truth bombs night after night, and the Ofcommunists did succeed. They saw Mark Steyn leave GB News, they saw Lawrence Fox leave GB News, they saw Father Calvin Robinson leave GB News, they saw me leave GB News. But if they think that they have silenced us, they are completely delusional about where the media is heading, because we don't need to be on a TV channel anymore. And actually, we're able to do better work. And I just want to say about Mark Steyn, if you can support him, please do. I will post the link in the description box below, and I will also post it on my X page. Mark is such a proud man. He would never, ever ask for anyone to support a cause like this. And he hasn't, actually. This has been set up by the Friends of Mark Steyn organisation. But just think about that. He's recovering from 2 heart attacks. He was standing up for free speech. And the Ofcommunists say, we want £144,000 off you, even though we don't need the money. We don't need the money because it all comes from the British taxpayer anyway. And I'm actually very excited too, because Mark Steyn is still going strong. And for the first time next year, I'm going to be joining the Mark Steyn cruise. Can you believe it? And it's going to be like the soundest cruise ever. I think people like Alison Pearson and Lilani Dowdy and Lawrence and Calvin and Naomi Wolf were all on board this ship. So it's going to be a very, very wild week, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. Maybe Patrick O'Flynn and Tom Sullivan, you need to get on board.
It's on my bucket list.
Thank you both so much. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source, and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.